there, this is Dr. May. In this video, we're going to be talking all about slope. So let's jump right in. I hope you've got your pencil and your paper ready to take some really good notes. Feel free to press pause during this video if at any point in time I move a little bit faster than you're ready to do that. It's the beauty of having the video there. So let's jump right in. Now, slope measures the steepness of a line. So it tells us how either steep or flat a line is. And it is the rate of change in y. So we'll say it is the rate of y's changed to x's change. So what do we mean by that? So on top, our slope is the change in y and over the change in x. Now, you may have heard of this as slope being the rise over the run. We're going to have lots of different ways to refer to slope in this video, so I want you to make sure your notes have all of them. Now, there are 4 different types of slopes. So notice on our first example here on the left that the line leans to the right. And anytime that lines lean to the right, that is a positive slope. So you might guess with our second example here that when a line leans to the left, we say that is a negative slope. Well, what about our last two where the lines don't lean? Well, the flat horizontal line, just like completely flat, no slant to it at all, this is a 0 slope. And the final one, my line here, it's completely vertical, up and down. It is no slope. Now, I've got a little trick to help you remember this one. I want you to think of an exclamation point. It's completely vertical. So anytime you see the vertical line, I want you to think, oh no, exclamation point. There is no slope there. So we're going to dig into this slope idea and calculating some slopes, but I want you to get the whole, the general idea is that the slope measures the steepness of a line. It is the change in the y values divided by the change in the x values. Okay, let's take a deeper dive. All right, so remember that we said that the slope is the rise over the run. It is the change in y values over the change in x values. So what I'm going to do here in a couple of examples is just use these points that I have on the graph to calculate the slopes. So our first one is from C to D. And the first thing you'll notice, we're going to do the rise first. But I'm going to start at C and I'm going to D. So let's count the rise. Uh-oh. I have to not rise. I have to actually fall. That's okay. That just means that our rise value is going to be negative. So let's count. 1, 2, 3. So my rise from C to D, my rise is -3. Now let's run, and we're running to the right, which running to the right is always positive. So from here, let's run to the right. 1, 2, 3. So we'll have a +3 as our run. And now you can divide. -3 divided by 3 gives us -1. Okay, pretty simple, but let's keep doing a couple of examples. What you might want to do now is to pause the video. Try the next one on your the next example here. See how you do, and then press play and see how I do it. All right, let's do B to C. So again, I do the rise first, and I get to go up this time. So I know that rise is going to be positive. Let's count. 1, 2, 3. So from B to C, my rise is +3. And then let's count the run. Again, we're going to the right, so that's positive. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So my run here is 6. Now, you and I know I can reduce that 3, 6 if I divide each of those numbers by 3, and I'll get my slope to be 1/2. Okay, good. Now let's go E to F. Now E, we're going to do our rise over our run. And our rise is actually going to be a fall, right? So we know this is going to be a negative rise. Let's count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And remember, it's negative because we're actually falling. And then notice that we got to F, so there is no run, but we can't leave that run blank. We actually have to put a 0 there. Friends, did you notice E and F make that vertical line? Remember, we think, oh no, exclamation point, no slope. And we can see it here because we cannot divide by 0. If the zero's on the bottom of that fraction, we can't actually divide it. All right, let's do B to D. Now, B to D, I notice that there is no rise. But just like before, I can't actually leave that blank. I have to put a 0 there. And then I'm going to count the run. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is my run. Now notice on this one, the zero's on the top. I can do 0 divided by 9 in my calculator, and I do get a 0 slope. So when you're using slope and you're doing rise over run, remember, rising, going up is positive, going down is negative. When you're running, to the right is positive, to the left is negative. Now, I've got one more method of finding the slope that I want to share with you. Let's take a look. So in this section here, I want to use the slope formula. So maybe I don't have a graph. Maybe I can't count the spaces up and over. So instead, I have to use the formula. Now, the beauty of this is that this formula is generally found on almost every formula chart, any standardized testing that you're doing. But it also is one I want you to have in your notes. So make sure that you get it inside your notes. You may be wondering about these little numbers on the y's and the x's. I want you to think of like y2 as just like the second y, okay? We don't have to make it more complicated than that. Y1 would be the first y, x2 would be the second x, and x1 would be the first x. So when I look at a set of points like example number 5 here, notice that the -2 would be my first x, and the 3 would be my first y. The 4 would be my second x, and the 8 would be my second y. So let's put those in the formula. Notice that in the formula, I'm subtracting the y's on the top. Remember how we talked about slope was the change in the y's divided by the change in the x's? That's exactly what this formula is doing here. So I'm going to take my second x, which is what my formula says, second x minus, I'm going to take my second y, which is 8 here, and I'm going to subtract my first y, which is 3. That's it on the top, right? Now watch when I do the bottom though, because it gets a little tricky with this negative. So I have to take my second x, that's what x2 means, and subtract my first x. And notice I did have to do subtract negative, okay? Now the subtraction here on top is pretty easy. 8 minus 3 is 5. And on the bottom, I want you to think about adding a line to that addition sign and changing the sign of the next number. Let me say that again. We change subtraction by changing the subtraction to an addition, adding a line by changing the sign of the next number. So instead of 4 minus -2, now I've got 4 plus 2, and that's 6. And 5, 6 would be my slope. Okay, let's do one more like that just so you got 2 good examples here. When we look at a set of points, we know that the 7 here is the first x and the -6 is the first y. The -5 is the second x and the 2 is the second y. So let's put those in our formula. We're going to do the second y, which is the 2, minus the first y, which is the -6. Remember, we do have to do minus negative, okay? Then on the bottom, I've got my second x, which is -5, minus my first x, which is 7. Now, at any point in time, if these negatives are difficult for you, use your calculator. Use the Desmos graphing calculator. I've linked it down below in the description. I hope you have it bookmarked as you're working through your math class. So it's definitely a great tool. But for now, I'm going to do the subtraction. I'm going to change the sign. I'm changing the subtraction to addition by changing the sign of the next number. So on top, instead of 2 minus negative 6, now I've got 2 plus positive 6, which is pretty simple to just add those. And then negative 5 minus 7. So I'm going to change that to plus by changing the sign of the next number. So instead of negative 5 minus 7, now I've got negative 5 plus negative 7, which gives me negative 12. Now, I'm hoping that 8 and 12 are ringing a bell for you. You're thinking, oh, yes, I can reduce that by dividing by 4. Both of those are divisible by 4. So 8 divided by 4 gives me 2, and negative 12 divided by 4 gives me negative 3. So my slope here is negative 2/3. All right. So I've given you a couple of different ways to find the slope here. We've done it with a graph, counting our rise over our run, and also doing it by formula. I hope this gives you some really good notes to work through in your lessons and in your algebra class. Let me know if you have any questions down below. Bye, everyone.